All right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I am your host, Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co-host, Jake Ellenbogen, and we are coming to you after our Rams won against the Indianapolis Colts in Week 4 in overtime, 29-23. Absolute roller coaster of emotions that game was, but we did end up with the win, which is what matters. In overtime, we got the ball first. As we all know, went right down the field, and Puka ended up getting his first career touchdown in a memorable fashion, to say the least, to seal the overtime win. But Jake, this game was kind of like a tale of two teams in a way, because we saw the first half, the Rams are rocking and rolling. Kyren Williams, 2 touchdowns, offense looked good, firing on all cylinders. They came out the second half and changed the game plan and didn't score a touchdown. The Rams did not score a touchdown the entire second half. And it just looked like they kind of had abandoned the run, which is something that we're familiar with the Rams. And the offensive line got a little shaky, and then Stafford got hurt, and it felt like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. But we hung in there, and we came in clutch, specifically Stafford and Nakua in overtime, and got the win, which is what matters. So, Jake, looking at this game, I think the big story here, other than Nakua's touchdown, which we're all very happy about because he's more than deserving, he's probably should have had a few already with the records that he's breaking, is the run game, because McVay clearly heard everybody after week 3, where they barely ran the ball against the worst running defense in the league and lost to a Bengals team that we should have beaten on Monday Night Football. So they came out this week and ran the ball. I mean, Kyren Williams, 103 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. To me, that is hopefully a positive that the Rams will take going forward to continue to run the ball, as well as keep feeding Puka Nakua. But what was your overall sentiment about this Rams versus Colts game, and how do you think this affects how the Rams go forward with the rest of the season?
Yeah, this game started off like, I think a lot of Rams fans looked at this as far as like college football goes. Like, you just want to pour it on. But I think tale of two halves, and I think the second half was really kind of a wake-up call. It's not going to be that type of year, and maybe it will. Who knows? Maybe down the road they're a well-oiled machine and all that. But you always have to be cognizant of the fact that, look, a win is a win in the NFL. And I thought this was a better Colts team than advertised. They just came off a huge road win against the Ravens. And I thought Anthony Richardson was just amazing, considering what was thrown his way. You look at the completion percentage, 11 of 25. Okay, like, that's not great. But what he did with his legs and the RPOs he commanded, how, he got Zach Moss going, and then just got, other guys going in the passing game. So when push came to shove, they went to the tight ends. They took advantage of the Rams, who have, been kind of gashed a little bit down the stretch with those tight ends. You look at the Tanner Hudson catch, right before halftime for the Bengals that set them up, and I see it. And I just think that, really the Rams went up against a good Colts team. They dominated the start, and I think it kind of led people to believe this is going to be a blowout, and rightfully so. I mean, we've seen Sean McVay blowouts in the past. But while Sean McVay, did run the ball in this one, I think a lot of people were hoping he was just going to, just put the foot on the neck, pedal to the metal for the offense. And I don't actually have any issue with the way this game went down. Here's why, Alexis. I think he was just trying to run out the clock. He's trying to play against a good football team on the road. I had no issue with him not pushing it, not going for the throat, and just settling for the field goals. If Maher makes that, now you're talking about a 29-point game. So it's a completely different game at that point. But furthermore, a lot had to go down to flip the game. And I think people are forgetting it's not when you noticed Stafford was hurt. Stafford got hurt, not you, Alexis, in general. Stafford got hurt early on in the second half. He took a hit from Dayo Odenigbo right after he threw it. I didn't think it was a penalty. Stafford, who never complains about penalties, said it was definitely a body weight thing. He got nicked up, and then it got worse and worse and worse. And the problem is, at that point, it's a conundrum because on one hand, you're like, I don't want to run it. I don't want to throw it with Stafford because I don't want him out there. I mean, he collapsed on one of the dropbacks, so he had to specifically be in the shotgun. On the other, Alexis, you have to balance it out. And it's like they're expecting you now with Stafford hurt to run the ball. So it's like they got into like a weird little predicament here where it's like, man, am I going to have the guy who's on one leg throw the ball the rest of the game? I mean, they really were down to that point because now the Colts really knew what they wanted to do, and so it really was a shame in that regard. But again, this is the NFL. It's survival of the fittest more than people want to admit. It's always about, oh, well, if we only had this guy, but that's the NFL, right? There's always injuries. You have to overcome them. If we only had this call, it's all about overcoming obstacles. That's what really the game of football is. You're going to have your penalties. You're going to have your injuries. Things are not always going to be perfect. And that's why I just have to give my hats off to, first off, Matthew Stafford for gutting out that performance. That's one of the best performances of his entire career, in my opinion. And the stats don't indicate it. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. We've talked about how the stats don't really indicate how well he's played this season. The interception, mind you, came right after the hit. So I just think it was more so he was banged up. But just the fact he was able to gut that out and go 75 yards in OT on the road on a short week. I mean, there's a lot of on this, on that. I thought that was really impressive. I mean, he was on one leg, and just what he was able to do just really stood out for me. The way Kyren Williams took it upon himself to kind of carry the load this week, 25 carries. I mean, this guy was, people were saying, oh, well, Sean McVay doesn't trust him, and that's why they're not running the ball. I don't think that was it. And I told you, and we talked about in the last show, I think Cam Akers was supposed to be a part of this offense. I think they were going to do a running back, a dual backfield. And when Cam kind of made it about himself, they had to move on from him. And I thought Ronnie Rivers, shout out to him. We saw what he did in preseason. We talked about what he did in preseason. It's one thing to do that against third stringers. You can only use that excuse so much. And we brought it up. It's still impressive. He's finding holes that aren't there. He's making guys miss. He goes ahead and he does that in this game. I thought he was excellent. He and Kyren really carried it. You talk about over 150 yards on the ground. Sean McVay, shout out to him running the ball 34 times. He probably runs it more if not for the injury, ironically. And Puka Nacua on the offensive side, if we're just sticking with the offensive side here and going to the defense later on, Puka Nacua was unbelievable. I mean, he would have had 200 yards if Stafford didn't get hurt. And this is a really good secondary. Like, I was really impressed. The guy who stood out for me was Dallas Flowers. Shut down Tutu Atwell. I don't think it was an Atwell thing. I think Dallas Flowers was awesome. And I hope he's going to be okay because I know he suffered what looked like potentially a season-ending injury at the end of that game. So that's what I would say, Alexis. As far as the offense goes, I thought the Rams did, they were dealt a bad deck and they were able to overcome it and win the game. And I think that's all that matters at the end of the day.
I agree. And let's talk about the offense first and what they did right. And you just talked about the run game. So let's talk about that a little bit, because you and I have been like screaming about this since really week 1, like run the ball. It's what has been working first and foremost for the Rams team, right? I mean, they, 2 receiving touchdowns on the year. You've got 7 rushing touchdowns on the year, including Cam Akers, 1 in week 1. So, running the ball has really worked for the Rams. And I was really happy to see that they actually ran the ball. Like I mentioned earlier, Kyren Williams, 25 carries, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. Ronnie Rivers actually averaged 5.2 yards per carry. He got 9 carries himself, 47 yards. I actually really like, Kyren and Ronnie actually run very similarly. Like when you watch them on the field and like their style, they are very, very similar type of running back. And I thought they both did very, very well against the Colts, and I was excited to see Ronnie get some more carries as well. Obviously, I was excited to see Kyron get those 2 touchdowns. And guess what, guys? He caught every pass. Now, he did have the fumble. So I have to bring that up. But I was talking with Jake, that hit was like, and that's no excuse. This is not an excuse because that fumble is inexcusable. But he got rocked. And I was actually happy to see that he didn't get hurt after that because my heart dropped to my stomach seeing that hit. That was a good hit. And it was a legal hit too. It was not illegal. It was a clean hit. And that's a welcome to the NFL hit. And he has to hold on to that ball. But yeah, he did have 3 receptions for an average 8 yards per reception, which is also pretty good. So they involved him. They involved, going to the passing game. Puka, obviously. I hope everybody took the over on receptions for him. It's always a good move. Tutu Atwell, didn't see much of him, but like you said, I think they just knew going into this game that I think Flowers had his mind made up that he was going to stay on Tutu Atwell, and he did a good job. So credit to him because I thought he contained Tutu pretty well. Tyler Higbee got some action in there. So I like that the ball was dispersed a lot amongst the receivers, even if there was that lack of receiving touchdowns until the very end, of course, in overtime, which is obviously good. I'm hope that we'll get there when Cooper comes back because that's just another receiving threat for the Rams, right? Then you got to focus on a third guy. So then you've got Cooper, Puka, and Tutu. You got to focus on all of them. So I'm hoping that when he comes back, that's going to open it up and that, we could start getting some receiving touchdowns. Although really, I don't care how we get touchdowns. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter as long as you get the touchdown. But I think we're going to start seeing some more receiving touchdowns going into that, Jake. Yeah, they just ran the ball and I was excited to see it. I hope that McVay remembers this and drills it into his mind. Okay, this is what works for us. This is how we score. This is what opens up the offense. And I hope that they do that going forward.
Yeah. To me, and I said this to you, during the game, I think this was McVay. He was pissed. He was really mad at himself Monday night. Doesn't show up for the Coach McVay show. I can't remember the last time he didn't show up for his own show. And then, you could see him at the podium on Wednesday. He looked like he saw something like, man, I messed up. And, to see that ownership that he always takes, you got to give credit where credit's due there. But it's that Sean McVay was willing to bounce back this week on a short week on the road. This is a great opportunity to throw the ball, but he came out. I mean, we were talking about Kyron Williams had 8 carries, going into half. He had 10 all of last, or actually it's 14, 8 at the end of the first. So 14 carries at the end of the half. And then you're telling me, this guy had 10 last week and you're telling me you're going to stick to the run and get him 25. Just hats off to McVay in that regard. I think he woke up. I think this, sometimes it just takes enough, like the straw that broke the camel's back. I might be, I might be setting myself up to be disappointed, like that Michael Scott meme. But I'll be honest with you, like I'm ready to get hurt again. Like let's do it. Let's call it. Alexis, I'm going to say it. Sean McVay learned from his mistake, and we won't see that again.
What makes me a little bitter though? I genuinely believe if they had this game plan against the Bengals, Kyron would have 8 touchdowns.
I don't know if he would have gotten 8, but he would have 8. That's for sure.
In total in the season, because I think he would have gotten 2.
Yeah.
He's had 2 every game except for the Bengals game. The one where
and they would have won if.
Well, and
they
would have
ran him at the goal line because, and I have to cut in here because I don't think people understand. It's not as simple as you get goal line touches. It's not just premium touches. You actually have to put the ball in the end zone. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. Gurley was great at it. Cam Akers struggled early on, then got a little bit better. Kyron has never struggled. I mean, when I watch him, he knows where it is. He knows the down and distance. And, he's going to put his head down. He's going to make some guys miss. He might, break some tackles. And he's going to plow his way for a touchdown. And he's done that now, 6-7 times this year. So, I think I mean, first off, the analytics speak for itself. He's third in DVOA. That's defensive adjusted value over average. And so when you look at that, he's only behind James Conner and Christian McCaffrey. And if you haven't been paying attention, James Conner's been unbelievable this year. And I don't have to say anything about Christian McCaffrey. He's the best running back in football. So he's in that standing right now, not running the ball anywhere near as much as he could until this game. He's in his third start, and according to success rate there, he's number one in running back success rate. That's over everybody in the league. So that's a minimum of both those, by the way, minimum of 60 carries. So we're just talking about starters. I'm not talking about guys that had 12 carries and ran well. I'm talking about guys that start down in, down out. And he's also top 5 in pass pro, according to PFF. So, I mean, the guy's doing everything that you could ask from him. He's, like I said, he's very identical to Darrell Henderson, kind of the same stats. And, Henderson just wasn't getting that love. And I don't think Kyron's getting it either. Like I've been saying, I feel like this guy is like the new Darrell Henderson. And I think a lot of the reason, Alexis, is because seeing Todd Gurley, seeing Steven Jackson, seeing Marshall Faulk, I think we're spoiled. I think we're a spoiled fan base in the running back room. I really believe that. And I think, while Kyron isn't blazing fast, he doesn't have to be. They're running a gap scheme. I showed you that graphic. I showed you that tweet I made. They have now only run 19 zone runs to 79 gap runs. So that's where we're at right now, is that the Rams are a gap running team. They're not a zone scheme anymore. Okay. And the Jets, before you ask me this, because I had people asking, Mike LaFleur ran a zone scheme with the Jets. So this isn't Mike LaFleur necessarily. This is Ryan Wendell, who came from the Bills, who run predominantly gap scheme. So I think it's really important here because zone, you're going to go to the outside, the edges, so to speak. So you want more explosiveness, which is why I feel like, at least in my opinion, like the Jonathan Taylor trade never made sense because they moved to that gap scheme. I'm not saying he can't run it, right? But I would understand a little bit more like, okay, now we have that speed, we have the explosion like Gurley, but they don't want to run the zone. They want to run the gap. And so I think, Kyron's doing everything he can and then some. I mean, I'd give him an A-. I think the drops hurt his grade a little bit, but A- as the starting running back since, Cam Akers went down, his third start. I think he's been everything and more for what the Rams would want. And I thought Ronnie Rivers, who has gotten hardly any burn this year, to come in and have 9 carries for 47 yards says a lot of, speaks volumes. And it says a lot about, first off, their trust in him. And second, the new running back coach, Ron Gold. I think he deserves a lot of credit for getting these guys ready. And shout out to Kyron Williams, who's been through now 3 running back coaches. And look, he looks even better under Ron Gold. So we'll see what happens. But I think if we see anything, it'll be probably, a Royce Freeman or a Zach Evans cutting into some of these carries and just having more of a committee backfield with Kyron leading the way. But I do think this is sustainable more than people realize. I think Kyron can withstand the punishment. I think he can go for 18 carries a game to 20. Maybe not 25 a game, but I think he go for 18 to 20. And I think his ability in pass pro and ability in the receiving game opens up everything. And he's doing all this without Cooper Kupp. So I think a lot of this is going to even get better when number 10 joins that offense.
I agree. And I mean, I just think stats don't lie. Everybody can say what they want, how he looks. A lot of people, Kyron is slow, whatever. A lot of people just haven't wanted to like him since the beginning, and we've talked about that. But stats don't lie. And look, he's doing it when we're not even running the ball enough, in my opinion. I mean, we did last game, but that was one game. You look at these other games, imagine what the stats would be if we actually utilize the run game like I think we should, and most people think we should. So, yeah, was very excited to see that, but was not surprised at all. Jake, as I say, we've been new. Kyron. That was not surprising for people who have been paying attention to see him have a game like that. And I suspect that we'll see more as it goes on. But let's talk about the defense. I thought the defense played in the first half very, very well. Really gave Anthony Richardson a hard time. Aaron Donald certainly did, which was not surprising. We saw him. He actually probably should have sacked him a lot.
We had 2 sacks, and they took one away, the strip sack, right, because of the penalty. They also
Right.
didn't award him the sack, and I don't know how it works, so maybe, anybody in the comment section can let me know. But to me, if a quarterback fumbles the snap and then repossesses the football, that's still a sack. You know what I'm saying? When
Yeah.
he bobbled the snap and then got the ball and then he fell down. Kyler Murray's had that. Aaron Donald touches his leg, it counts as a sack. I thought Aaron Donald got ripped off from having 3 in this game, to be honest. He was unbelievable. He really was.
Yeah. He really was. And I love to see it up front. I love seeing guys like Kobe Turner and Jonah Williams got in on the action. I thought they really provided some good pressure up front. Anthony Richardson did his best. I mean, if it was anybody other than Anthony Richardson, quarterback might have had a worse day, but I have to give credit where credit's due. I thought Anthony was able to kind of, spin around and wiggle and get his way out of a couple more sacks, gain some yards with his legs in a way that only he can do because he's so amazing. And like, everyone knows how I feel about Anthony Richardson, but he's really fun to watch play. I thought the secondary did pretty well in the first half. Jake, I just cannot stop thinking about Michael Hoecht in coverage against tight ends and receivers. Like and I'm not taking away from the defense as a whole, because like I said earlier, the defense did do very well. They did completely break down in the second half for reasons that I'm not even quite sure what they are. I don't know, and we'll talk about that, but it was very bizarre to watch. But I want to specifically start with having Hoecht deep in coverage. Like there were plays where he was where a safety should be on these tight ends and receivers, and watching it as a Rams fan who knows what position he plays, it's why is he out there doing that? I don't even know. Jake, I'll let you answer this because I don't know the answer. I don't know why that's happening. I don't believe that Raheem Morris is asking him to go play a pseudo linebacker or safety position, unless I'm missing something. Why are we seeing him in coverage against these tight ends and receivers?
Yeah, I mean, he's now leading by quite a margin for drop backed snaps, in coverage. I mean, he's had 52 of all edge defender. That's insane. I mean, I think the next true edge defender, we're not counting Van Ginkel who plays off ball, but we're talking the next true edge defender has 30 something. I mean, I don't know why that they are so obsessed with putting a 310, 6'4" guy out in coverage like that. I understand he is incredibly athletic. I mean, can't say enough about his athleticism. He should not be able to move at that size, right? That doesn't mean he needs to be covering Josh Downs over the middle. That was insane. He still made it was good play. I mean, he still gave up the catch. He's given up 8 out of 8 catches out of 8 targets thrown to him for 8.9 yards a pop. But no, Blaine actually mentioned something I thought was interesting here. They need to use Nick Hampton on passing downs. You can still see there's something there with Hoecht. He still can help in the run game. He's a bigger body, so it works, in the trenches. But on passing downs, this is what Blaine brought up. In 2021, he was the 4th best edge defender in coverage, according to PFF. And then he was really good in 2022. They drafted him in the 5th round. He is somewhat of a project. But if there's one thing I think to get the rookie's feet wet would be to put him in those passing downs, because those guys are dropping back in coverage more than I've ever seen Rams defenders do off the edge. I mean, we have not seen this. Byron Young is still dropping back at an alarming rate. He can also do it. Hoecht, I mean, he looks like a fish out of water. I'm sorry. He's a great athlete, but I feel like that's not the best way to use him. And so I was sitting back on Sunday, and I got to tell you, the Rams might have their edge defender. It's Aaron Donald. Hear me out when I say this. I think Aaron Donald, I'm not saying he should start. on the outside like that, I think he should play half the game on the outside. I really do. Because watching him go, and I understand it was Freeland, Blake Freeland. He really struggled. But I think Aaron Donald was going to give anybody fits, whether that was Ryman or whoever. He is unbelievable. He can play in the inside. He can play on the outside. Hell, he could play middle linebacker, I'm pretty sure. I mean, just how athletic and how quick he is and how dominant he is. Not the best usage of him. But when you have Jonah Williams, who you mentioned, by the way, is number 5 in all of football right now in run stop rate. Okay. Jonah Williams is killing it. I want him on the field more. So you talk about Jonah Williams, and then you have Kobe Turner, and then you got Bobby Brown. I want to give these guys more run and opportunity in the trenches. I want to put Aaron Donald on the outside. He's got the same amount of pressures as TJ Watt right now. He's tied for 5th in the league when you combine edge and defensive interior guys. He was unbelievable in this game, and he only has like 19 or like 18 snaps rushing off the edge, and I think he should get more, because I think until they go and they trade for an edge defender, Aaron Donald is probably your best bet, because there's not another guy on the roster, unless you're going to try the rookie Nick Hampton on those passing downs, because he can drop into coverage. There's not a guy as far as rushing the passer that is going to give you that production like AD. And by doing so, you still get to put Bobby Brown, Jonah Williams, and Kobe Turner on the field. So, I mean, they're still going to have a rotation there, but I think it would make him even more dangerous, because I think he can do it. It's not even like, oh, he can do it. I think he would dominate doing it. And then at this point, because I said half the game, right? Then you put him in the interior. So he's just wearing down everybody. I mean, I think we start to see maybe that's the direction they're going in, but they did start to move him to the outside a little bit. I noticed in that Colts game, and he just eviscerated Blake Freeland. And I think by him doing that, it weakens that guy. So now the offensive lineman is gassed. I just had to go up against Aaron Donald for that whole drive. And now it's like you put Michael Hoecht back on him, and in hindsight, you could say, okay, this is going to be easier. But I would say like Aaron Donald's going to wear these guys down, and it'll make it easier for other guys to go up against him 1v1. And it's more likely to get 1v1 matchups for Donald if he's rushing off the edge instead of going right into the trenches. So I actually like that. I'm curious what your thoughts are, but that was a big takeaway for me, that they were moving him all over the defensive line.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, that they were starting to use him like a defensive end, and I liked it. I mean, and also, like you said, I think he could play anywhere, especially on that front line. I really think that, he's going to be a massive threat no matter what position you put him in. So I also think it gives a good element kind of surprise and confusion to the offense, moving Aaron Donald around, because you have to account for him. Who's going to block for him now? Having him go against every position on that offensive line throughout the game can really mess, I think, with an offense's game plan. And I think it's a good idea, because we are missing that edge guy opposite Byron Young. We don't, like we've talked about, we don't really have that other typical edge rusher on the other side. So fill it in with Aaron Donald. Go for it. Why not? Let guys like Jonah Williams and Kobe Turner, feast in the middle and move Aaron outside. So I thought that was really good. And I think they should continue doing that going forward, because they saw success with it. Yeah, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about, and I don't want to talk about this, but we should, but why we blew the 23-0 lead? We're covering the game. I think that this was kind of like a combination of a couple different things, but I think the main things for me, just watching the game, was offensively, you completely abandoned the run. It was like it worked so well in the first half. They came out in the second and they were like, you know what? We don't need to do this anymore. Let's start throwing the ball. But the problem is then when they started doing that, it wasn't working. The offensive line then started to have some problems. Then Stafford got hurt. And then you get to the situation where defensively, they kind of just let the Colts run all over them for a few drives. And then we talked about this kind of against the Bengals, where you get to the point where it's like you can't really afford to run the ball anymore. Like you need to like start scoring points. And then I felt like everything just kind of got really, really sloppy towards the end of the second half. What do you think was the main reason that the Rams couldn't score or stop the Colts from scoring in the second half?
Well, I thought so. End of the second quarter, the Colts, they elected to defer the coin toss. They won it, so they decide they go for it. Coming out of the half, the Rams 3 and out. They go down. They spend about 5 minutes going down the field. They settle for a field goal. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was. Let's see. No, it doesn't look like that was the drive that Stafford got hit. I don't believe. So anyway, yeah, it wasn't the drive. Okay, so the Rams kick a field goal to go up 23-0. The Colts come back down the field after that. You were talking about 7 minutes left in the third. And they get this huge run, and they needed it. It was like a shot in the arm. They get this huge run by Zach Moss, who's played really well since he came back from injury. Such a great fit for the Colts. Then he goes for another. So he gets a huge run, 20 yards. Now, instead of the 25, they're at the 45. He gets him past midfield. Then he gets another 13-yard run on that drive. So at that point, I'm not sure what the defense is doing. I don't know if they're expecting the run. That might be it. But I also think Moss is just he's hard to bring down. He's hard to, because he's going to wear you down. He's a power back. We've talked about him before. But then, you talk about it, 1st and 10 at the Los Angeles 35, and Anthony Richardson just makes an incredible throw, to Mo Alley Cox for the 35-yard touchdown. At that point, that's a response. I wouldn't say they flipped the game, right? So it's 23-8. And then Stafford, this is where he gets hurt. First play of this drive, he gets belted after the play. It's an incomplete pass to Tutu Atwell. He gets belted after the play by Odenigbo. And then the next play, Stafford, as they break down on the on the telecast, Stafford cannot step into his throw. We knew something was off. That was a bad throw to Tutu Atwell. Kenny Moore undercuts the route, picks it off, and this is where the game completely flips. The crazy thing about this, by the way, is that while it completely flipped, the Colts didn't capitalize right after that. As a matter of fact, the defense was great on the next drive. So what ends up happening is that they start off at the LA 42. So they're already ready to go. The defense is, they got their back against the wall. So, they're ready to go. A 3rd and 7. They sack Anthony Richardson. Aaron Donald strip sacks. He gets the ball out. It's recovered by Roseboom at the LA 44, but there's a penalty on Tomlinson. See, this is important here because that would have put the Rams in plus territory, or close to plus territory, and it would have been a turnover, but they called a penalty on Tomlinson. After that, Moss runs up the middle, incomplete pass by Richardson, and a great play by Quentin Lake. Turnover on downs. So the defense actually responds. The problem is what we see on the next drive. The Rams start at the 31. Kyron runs for 9. Kyron runs for 6. Kyron runs for 4. Then they try to run. Now they try to throw it a little bit. This is when Stafford, it starts to really, it starts to become evident that he's in a lot of pain. This is getting worse as this is progressing. Stafford, at one point or another, is literally going to fall down. Like his leg is just going to give out on this drive. They do get a pass interference call that goes in their favor, and they get a neutral zone infraction. But Stafford, unfortunately, on 3rd and 10, connects to Tutu Atwell for 6. They take the conservative approach. McVay's like, we will take the 26-8 lead, right? No, Maher misses the 48-yard field goal. This is when it completely flips because the Rams defense makes a nice response. The Colts turnover on downs with that response. Rams come back. They have a decent drive. They get a little conservative down in plus territory, and then they kick the field goal at the Indy 29. Maher, he drops the ball wide left. Then the next drive, Alexis, this is where the game flips because the Colts, time is their enemy here. The Colts go down the field. It's the fourth quarter now, and they just go right down the field. They waste no time. We're talking about 2 minutes and 31 seconds on this drive. They go 62 yards on 6 plays. But a big reason for this is a 15-yard pass to Michael Pittman. A big reason for this is an unnecessary roughness call from the Alec Pierce 38-yard catch on Witherspoon. And then Russ East comes over. He hits some unnecessary roughness. That put him right in the red zone after that, right? So there's a lot of things that kind of come down to it. They go down the field. Then the Rams come back out. So it's now been answered, right? The Colts, things that are going on. It's 23-15. It's interesting. But here's the key, Alexis, is that the Rams, Stafford can't throw. Like this is when it starts to get really, really bad. And so Stafford gets sacked by Odenigbo to start. Stafford, he ends up getting, I think he has a plus yard gain. And then they decide to punt the ball. They actually run it 3 straight times with Kyron. This is what I'm talking about. So this goes back to what we were talking about when they know you're going to do one thing and you've tried to throw it and now you have to run it because Stafford can't even move at this point. Now they run it 3 straight times. Kyron Williams gets 7 yards on 3 carries. So now you have to punt it for the first time in the game. And now the Colts decide they're in the driver's seat. This is how momentum swings. They're at home. They have the Rams right where they want them. It is 23-15, and they know they're 8 away, which they can get on this drive. So they go 83 yards, Alexis, after a good punt. They go 83 yards in 5 minutes and leave, let's say, about 2 minutes left on the clock. So that's when the Rams defense just is exhausted, right? Because they've used physical football. Anthony Richardson is not like a regular quarterback. So defenses are having to run more. So there's a lot going on. Then the Rams punt, and then the defense is able to get a huge 3 and out. The Rams punt again. We go to OT, and then Matthew Stafford has an incredible 8-play, 75-yard drive in 4 minutes to win the game. And that's how it happened. I don't think the defense played that poorly. I think there were spots where they did, but I also think the amount of yards that they had to cover, because think about this. Richardson kept plays alive that Joe Burrow wasn't keeping alive, right? So I think these guys were gassed, and that's what I think happened.
That was a very long answer, but what I was getting at, and that was all very good and all very true. What I was getting at is I think that had they stuck to the game plan off the rip, second half, that they had come into the first half with, I don't think that the Colts would have caught up, because the Rams didn't come out and score at all in the second half, right? And things didn't fall apart until the end of the third. And I feel like when they came out in the third, offensively, it became very clear that they had completely abandoned what they were trying to do in the first. And that's when I started to get a bad feeling. Then, yes, obviously the defense is the one that allows the points, not the offense. So it wasn't just the offensive game plan, but I do think the defense got, like you mentioned, very gassed.
Yes.
That was something that became apparent. When you are on the field that long because your offense isn't doing anything, then Stafford gets hurt and then the whole game plan has to change. I feel like you could just slowly watch it unravel at the seams. Now, we did bounce back in overtime, which is what matters, but I do think that could be a learning experience for the offensive play calling going forward this season. Maybe if something's working, don't just pivot like that. Because I think, and I know I wasn't the only one who thought this. I saw on Twitter as well when we were all live tweeting the game during the beginning of the second half, everybody was what is this offense doing? Like, why are you forcing the ball? Why are you not doing what you were doing earlier? And then all of a sudden you're watching the Colts get one touchdown. You're watching them get another touchdown. And then you're watching the defense very tired. And so I think it was like clock management, which, to close this out, clock management was something you and I talked about at the game at the very end of the fourth quarter. I don't want to say it's Achilles heel for McVay, but he certainly in recent seasons has not done a very good job with clock management, especially at the end of the fourth quarter. I thought that game, the last, and I'd have to go back and look at when this was, the last 2 minutes of that game, there was a couple calls where the play clock ran like 10 seconds before we call a timeout. And I was like, this is not the situation to do that. Then Stafford was taking forever to get the ball snapped. I don't know if that was on him or on the center.
That was Coleman Sheldon.
Yeah,
that
but
was
it was
twice
like,
too.
Yeah, twice they took forever to get the ball snaps.
What is happening?
I don't know if everyone just saw, but anyone who's watching, if you just saw Jake's screen, there's been like emojis floating. I don't know what causes that. There was a like button earlier. Did you see that? Like above your head?
Yeah, what the hell?
I don't know.
I'm so confused because I didn't set up anything. I don't know what that is.
Well, anyway, clock management was not great. I did not like the clock management in the last 2 minutes because I thought that we had a chance to avoid going to overtime, which it ended up working out because we won. So I'm not saying I'm not happy that we won in overtime, but that was, I think, one of you look at the mistakes that the Rams made in this game, clock management at the end of the game, not very good. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that at all because that was something that we talked about, but I figured I'd throw it out there because I know a lot of people saw the same thing and were just like, what is going on?
I mean, I came away like feeling different than the fan base in this game because I think Sean McVay's game plan worked. I think if Maher makes those 2 field goals, it changes the game. I think it's a momentum based game, and I think that having 39, almost 40 minutes of time of possession in this game. I mean, the Colts only had it 24 minutes. The reason why I say the defense was gassed, it's different, right? It wasn't that the defense was on the field the whole time. It's that every single one of those reps, Alexis, when you're going against a mobile quarterback that can keep that play 10, 13, 15 seconds long, that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. And that's the thing. He's, scrambling, scrolling out and everything. That's the time that DBs have to cover, linebackers have to cover, defensive linemen are trying to stop him. That's what makes it, honestly, like these dual threat quarterbacks are game breakers because of that. Because as the game wears on, you can do different things now because you have tired out the defense without even having the ball that much. And that's the real impressive thing that happened. So I think Sean McVay had a plan going into this. We're on a short week. We're going up against a good football team that knows how to win against good football teams because they went on the road and they beat Baltimore. We're expecting this to be a tough game. I am just going to take the points here. I'm not going to try to push it, And so I think those 2 field goals, I would like to see more points. Like, I'm not against that, obviously, but I will defend McVay. I think his game plan worked. I think the field goals were missed, but at the end of the day, they do end up winning the game. And I think, even when the Colts were coming back, I still kind of felt like they were just going to win anyway. I still felt like they were just going to win anyway. It was different than the Bengals game. That game, when the Rams were winning the majority of that game, and you and I were like, I got a bad feeling about this one. I mean, they wouldn't run the ball. So, you're just thinking this is what's happening right now is not sustainable. And it wasn't. We were right about that. But now this game, they dominated the Colts and they let the Colts back into it. And a lot of that, you got to give Shane Steichen credit, and especially Anthony Richardson. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think Raheem Morris. I mean, Raheem Morris threw everything at the rookie quarterback, and he just continued to use that RPO and make plays with his legs and extend plays and throw off platform. The reason why, and as you know, I loved Anthony Richardson coming out of this draft. The reason why I felt like he had the highest ceiling of anybody in this draft, and a guy that I think could be like Patrick Mahomes someday. So I think the Rams just played a potential superstar, and they come away with the win against a defense that had 11 sacks. You only allowed 2 on Stafford. But I'm glad you brought up the Coleman Shelton piece, because that has to be mentioned. He's played well. Okay. I'm not going to try to like tear him apart. He has got to be better. He's got to be mindful in those close moments. The tutu Atwell drop, like, first off, tough catch to make, right? But it was ruled a catch. And Stafford's trying to get up to the line and he's clapping his hands. He's like, all right, let's go. Come on. And he's saying, and you just, Coleman Shelton's not snapping the ball. He's got to be cognizant of that. That's one. The second thing is he took too long to snap the ball when like you said, the clock management. I don't even know if that's on McVay. Like, he had to call a timeout because of how long Coleman Shelton took. So, we're pro Coleman Shelton here. We want him to start, and he's played well. But those are some things where at the end of the day, you have to be better in those situations. And I'm sure he will be. And I'm sure that's something that'll be brought up. But that's definitely something, Alexis, where, they might have had to sweat it out a little bit more than maybe they should have. If Coleman, snaps those two, they probably get the first down and they probably kick a field goal. And who knows what happens then in regulation, because they had to punt it back due to the fact they didn't pick up that fourth down. So just, some things that, I think a lot of different guys missed. There's some good, there's some bad, there's some ugly. The ugly is that Stafford was really, it was hard to watch him limping, if I'm being honest. You never want to see a player like visibly injured out there, still gutting it out. You respect it, but you just rather not see it. Stafford, Sean McVay, I just saw it came up. Sean McVay confirmed that Matthew Stafford has a hip contusion. His quote, "We'll be smart with him, but it should be good to go." He is a stud, and obviously we saw him gut through that yesterday, but definitely took a good shot there. We feel he should be fine. So, look, if that's the case, that's the case. But I'll admit to you, I already conceded the Eagles game in the middle of this one, because my first thought was that he's not going to be able to play next week. And they're all in on this game because of that, because they know they're not winning next week if he can't play. But if he's back next week or this week, who knows? But those are my takeaways, Alexis. I had no issue. Obviously, you don't want to give up a 23-point lead. You don't want to get Falcons. But at the same time, I had no issue. Just as long as they got the win, that's all I care about at this point. Just get those wins.
And we did. Can't complain. We got the win. Very exciting. We're now at 2-2. I think both you and I had them at 3-2 after 5 games in our season prediction. So we'll see if we're right next week. But we'll cover that.
I actually had them at 2-3, but I have them winning 10 games, so I'm not out on them. But I had them losing this Philly game, and so now I have to reevaluate.
One of us will be right, and one of us will be wrong, because I believe I had them at 3-2. You had them at 2-3. So we'll see. Who's right and who's wrong. But hey, I know we're all rooting for a win. We'll be back, guys, to cover that later this week.
Hoping to see Cooper Kupp.
Yes, we should be. It sounds like as of now, we will be seeing Cooper Kupp against Eagles. Fingers crossed. But it looks like it's heading in that direction. So very excited about that, guys. As always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. You can follow us at Downtown Rams on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at the Alexis Kraft. You can follow Jake at JKBogan. And guys, like I said, we'll be back later this week to preview our matchup against the Eagles. But until then, stay safe, take care, and go Rams.